Awesome. Hi everybody. Welcome to my talk. I am Tenaya Douglas. I am the head of design at a company called Monkey and River, and I'm also the co-founder of Uzzy User Research. And I hope that we all enjoy the session. So today I'm going to be poking a little bit of fun or poking a little bit at one of the favorite beliefs in UX. And that belief is that UX is always worth it. It needs to be everywhere. Um, and obviously, going to be doing it in our typical UX process of making sure we actually investigate all the little bits of it. And I'm actually really excited to have gone after Nicola's talk because I was listening in, and it was kind of an interesting experience for me because some of what she's saying challenges what I was saying, but then at times I actually thought, no, wait, I think the both of them together will probably end up with a really interesting outcome, and a lot of thoughts about basically where are we at as the UX community. So yeah, I am going to jump in. So firstly, I'm going to run a little bit of an experiment because this talk is online. I know some people really like to be able to take notes, but also see things while they're busy taking those notes. There's very visual people, there's very auditory people. So I've created a FigJam link. We're also going to post it in the chat here. Mary is going to be helping us out a little bit there. You also can just take a screenshot of it or get the QR code. And yeah, it's basically just a space where you guys can interact. You can leave questions for me that I'll come to later. Obviously, there is the general Q&A as well that I'll answer afterwards. But also, just very quickly, for the sake of this talk, I want to note that I'm going to be using the term UX as a catch-all for UX UI, product design, UX research, copywriting, design thinking, basically any role that's really primarily focused on the experience that the end user has. So just keep that in mind. Awesome. Now that we've all got that sorted, let's jump in and start like all good projects do with the problem statement. Now, I'm going to start with a sentence that might sound a bit wrong at the UX conference, that UX isn't always worth it, but just hear me out. It's an uncomfortable truth that I've been struggling with this entire year, basically. As the head of design, that I'm trying to lead a group of different designers at different levels with a very wide range of clients that themselves are at a lot of different levels of UX maturity. And also, as somebody that is currently trying to build out a user research tool, that in a lot of cases is seen as a luxury. So it is quite a tough subject to look into. But for me, I've come to terms with the fact that I think insisting that UX is always worth it sometimes actually makes it harder for companies to value what we do. So that is where I started. But to be very clear upfront, this isn't a burn UX to the ground talk. I am most definitely not saying that we should become pixel pushers, that we should embrace dark design patterns, or that we should stop trying to expand the impact that UX has. I'm not saying that at all. What I really want us to look at is to ask the questions of where's UX actually worth it? How do we sometimes help to undervalue our own discipline? And what we can do practically to make UX more realistic, accessible, and impactful. Cool, we've got our problem statement. Now, time to do some initial research and ideation. One of the places that we can start is with the problems that we traditionally talk about as UX designers and practitioners. A lot of times our base thing is that UX is undervalued. And then as a result, we're often given problems instead of solutions. I'm pretty sure we've all been there. A PM comes to us and says, do this. Oh, sorry, this is actually swapped around. We're given solutions instead of problems. I just noticed that. We're often given solutions instead of problems. We're told to just put the button there because the CEO wants it. Then we're also often faced with the thing of budgets are too tight. There's no time for the ideal processes or the ideal best practice scenarios. And in some cases, there's no time for UX at all. We're often also just asked to make things pretty instead of actually making them meaningful. And we're often also brought in too late after the decisions are already made. I'm pretty sure there are many, many other scenarios like this that everybody has faced on a day to day. It's the traditional thing of UX being undervalued. And it is very easy to blame the business or corporate greed and just walk away or resign ourselves. But like any good researcher, we should investigate that. What are some of the external forces that create this problem? Um, the talk before this was perfect to chat about the capitalist, corporate, and very country specific context that we work within. And obviously, capitalism is a very, very big impact on what we do and the external forces that we have to deal with. Very often, most companies, especially in South Africa, will have this kind of order of priorities. Firstly, they're going to be optimizing for revenue, making sure that you're actually making a profit. Then you get to the managing of expenses and risk avoidance. And then, if you're lucky, after that comes employee and customer satisfaction. If you're not so lucky, sometimes it's the fourth or the fifth or the 11th priority. It's the smaller circle in a company's value system. But I would like us to play the empathy game, something that we should all be pretty good at, and try and think about things from another perspective. If we start with revenue, revenue is ultimately just the result of value creation. Business at its core, and where it started and what it should be, is just an exchange of value. Businesses that flourish are often the ones where there's a fair exchange of value. We, as the product team, create something that the user gets something out of, and in return, they give something back: money, time, and attention. But revenue itself is also job creation. If we are making money, that means people get paid and they're able to look after themselves and their families. So that's revenue. When we look at priority number 2, managing expenses and risk avoidance, there we can start to think about the decision makers who have to manage that risk. They have to make sure that the expenses are not too high. In a lot of cases, and I'm not necessarily talking about the big exco teams, but it can really range from any person in that leadership position. For them, they are responsible for a lot of people's well-being. And if they do their jobs correctly, people should get paid fairly and they should keep their jobs. So there's actually a lot of weight and there's a lot of responsibility on these people when they're looking at managing expenses and the risk avoidance. So when you start to look at these two things, you can start to think about it as it's understandable that the core priorities of stakeholders are a little bit more focused on things that are the hygienic factors of business. And that it's only once those are done and those are looked after that they can really invest in improving the employee and customer experience. So if we look at it from that perspective, if what we're offering is framed as slow, expensive, fragile, it's definitely going to lose against those priorities that feel more concrete. The priorities such as shipping features or meeting regulatory requirements. So I feel it necessary to just pause a little bit now. And after Nicola's talk, It is very important to note that not, I'm speaking very generically here. There are many, many companies that do exploit people, and there are many issues with corporate greed. However, even in those scenarios, we should also think about the fact that very often we're not actually dealing directly with those big bosses, with the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world that make those crappy decisions. We're dealing with the other humans. We're dealing with the people directly around us. And in the South African environment, we're also often dealing with smaller budgets, leaner teams, and often no dedicated researchers. I also want us to maybe stop and be honest enough to ask, where are we part of the problem? There's the internal side, the part that's on us. Our priorities can affect others' perceptions of UX. I'm going to go through a couple examples. The first one being the fact that we often ask and prompt and push for UX to be part of all the processes. I am very, very guilty of this. I want to go in and say we should be the strategic superpower in all the different places. We can be there for strategy, we can be there for the QA, we can be everywhere. Um, and I'm very guilty of then making it seem like UX is the hero, it's the savior that's going to come in and make everything better. I was speaking to someone last night who's done work in many different countries in Africa, and he was saying a lot of the times when South African companies come to different African places, we come with the savior complex. And for that reason, a lot of those companies fail. No one really likes to have somebody come in and treat them as if we know everything, we can solve it, you know nothing, really. Then another one of the things that is often from our perspective is that we want to do full validation and full design thinking processes. Understandably, we want to do that. It what gets the best results. However, when we often ask for these things and we push for it and it is part of our daily conversations, it can make it seem like it's an all or nothing process. It can make it seem like we're not willing to compromise or work around the context of the company that we're in. Then we also get to the idea that we're often advocating to fix all UX and UI issues, no matter the impact. It's something, once again, that I am very guilty of. You sit there, you look at something, you know it's wrong, it's the button that's slightly off, and you want to advocate that all of these things should be fixed. However, often what goes with this is that we overpromise magic numbers if all of these small things are fixed. We often make it seem like if the app is perfectly polished, there'll be this amazing response from everybody. And yes, sometimes that is true, but a lot of times we are actually overpromising. Then there's also the fact that we often want to finish to a gold standard before we hand over. We want to make sure that it is perfect, that we have thought through everything 100%. We've done all the different flows, all the different states. And obviously, there's a time and a place for that. But in a lot of cases, when we have that mindset, to others, UX will be seen as a gate that the product has to get through instead of a shared pathway that many different people can be a part of and that the product will continually go along. So, with these things that I'm talking about, I know there's going to be some conflict, and I would love to hear your guys' feedback because a lot of what I've said on our perspective is not inherently wrong. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing these things. What I am saying, though, is that how we speak about it, how we portray it to others, might not always be understood the way that we want it to be. And there's always a time and a place, there's always a correct context. If we want to try and actually delve a little bit deeper, if you're not quite convinced, need a little bit of competitor analysis for any good desk research phase, then maybe we can have a look at the Google magic one word change. You've probably all heard a lot of stories like this. There's many, there's ones from Uber, from Airbnb. But I think the one that I've heard said many, many times is that if you change one word in the call to action, there'll be a 40% increase in conversions on bookings, for example. And now that obviously can happen 100%. It can happen. It has happened. I think we've all been able to make some of those changes. But in reality, most of the small UX tweaks that we do really get marginal gains, or in some cases, no gain. Or the probably more common reality is that success is driven by a number of different factors. UX is one of them. It's also driven by pricing, timing, brand, or sometimes something else entirely. And now, the problem is we often try and promote our self worth by telling these magical stories of, look, we did this amazing thing. But, but then we kind of ignore the stories of, we did great UX. It looks amazing. It is perfect. But then numbers barely moved. And then we kind of set these unrealistic expectations. And not only that, but we aren't actually truly educating or bringing our team along with us, because we're only talking about one small part. And what happens when stakeholders don't see that magic? We break their trust. We force them to second guess when we say that something is actually going to have an impact. Now, this is just my opinion. You guys are more than welcome to pose your own thoughts of, like, what then is actually the truth of the problem. Is it that UX is undervalued? Or is it that UX is misunderstood? Is it that people don't want UX, that they don't want to pay because they don't think it's worth it? Or is there just a lack of understanding? One of the favorite quotes that I had from this year is, don't assume malice where ignorance may suffice. Basically, meaning that in a lot of cases, people aren't actually wanting to cause harm, to dismiss you, to hurt you. In a lot of cases, it's just that their perspective and their lived experience doesn't match yours. A real world example of this is if someone cuts you off during traffic. We've all had those idiots in front of us, and we've all been incredibly frustrated. I had it just on my way here. But I can also bet that every single one of us has unintentionally cut someone else off, even if don't think you have. I know you have. And it's because you weren't paying attention, or you made the wrong snap judgment of how fast someone was coming at you. So that's a very good example of the fact that sometimes it is just that someone is ignorant. It is not they are actually trying to create a negative environment for you. Why I'm very glad that Nicola's talk came before this is it's a perfect example of the fact that, like most things we deal with, the discussion isn't actually simple. It's not black and white. It is a wicked problem. If you haven't heard of a wicked problem before, it's basically one where there are too many factors to really have a single solution. There are things relating to company culture, personal experience, ability, your industry, the target audience, your access to technology, your education, your leadership structure. It goes on and on and on. And for that reason, it's time to get into a little bit of divergent thinking. But before we have the cursory cat photo, just in case you felt like you yourself were giving up, don't worry, it's okay. Oh, and cursory time for cat here as well. So we won't go into all of the facets of the problem. We just do not have the time. But now that we've established that UX is often misunderstood, let's look at a couple examples. Feel free to put it in the comments if you have any. But I want you to think of an app that you use fairly frequently, one that doesn't have the best experience, but one that gets the job done. It might be one that causes your eye to kind of twitch, or it might be kind of like the Apple mouse, which I've had many a passionate discussion about. But think of those annoying forms, the clunky banking interfaces, or the terrible government portals that we all use because we have to. It kind of brings up the fact that there's an uncomfortable reality we all know, but we don't really want to admit. And that is that people tolerate a surprising amount of bad UX if the core value is strong enough. And in those cases, good UX is not what's keeping the product alive. It's sometimes a differentiator, sure. If you look at different banking apps, it is something where you can tell the UX is different, but it isn't always the core value driver. Timu is a great example, a great example of that. And before I continue, I do want to acknowledge something extremely important. I'm not saying that value and UX are mutually exclusive. And I will say that, or I'll even argue that there's teams where the product was, there's teams where the product was built solely by developers. And even there, the people were actually actively caring about the experience. It might have been uninformed and uneducated guesses by the developers, but they were still caring about the experience. So value and UX are not mutually exclusive, but value can exist without perfect and full UX processes. Now, time for the solution ideation. How do we actually focus on value? This is my current iPad cover. I am building it from upcycled materials, bottle caps, fabric, all sorts of bits and bobs. It is extremely half done. It is aggressively in progress. And I'm not going to lie, it looks extremely weird. Every time I look at it, the designer part of my brain just kind of twitches. However, it does the job. I had to make a choice, live with something imperfect, or sink more time into it when I had other, more important things to do. And I know that that discomfort is something that's very familiar to us. And we always have the thing of, but it could be better. I know it. That, and as designers, that it could be better muscle is very important, but it can also be a trap. Almost every screen, every flow, every internal tool could be more polished, could be more consistent, could be more delightful. And the question is not, could this be better? Ultimately, the question is it worth it to make it better here now with what we have? That's where pragmatism really comes in. And honestly, it's where a lot of us, myself included, do struggle. As much as I showed you the iPad, I really struggle to actually put that up there. Every time I bring it out, I struggle. So how can we actually decide when UX is worth it? There's 3 things that I like to ask myself, and there is a little disclaimer down there. It always depends, something my team hears me say far too often, but there's 3 things you can start with. Firstly, frequency. How often does the interaction between the user and the app happen? Impact. What is at stake for the user, the team, and the business? Now, this impact is both for if you get it right and if you get it wrong, which leads me to the next thing, which is risk. What happens if we get this wrong? And now that can both be what happens if we design this poorly and the end result is bad, to also what happens if we invest a huge amount of time into this thing and then users don't use it. We can look at a couple examples, and I saw someone say SARS e-filing, which is a perfect example of what we'll be looking at. So first one is, let's just say it's a value add feature on an existing app. This could be something like a banking app where you have your core features, but then you're adding in a couple extra things like education elements. It's something that maybe someone would use 20 minutes once a year. There's a low user emotional attachment to the outcome. They don't really care if it works. It's no biggie to them. And then on the risk side, ultimately, there's not a huge amount of risk to the user or the business. It's a bank, they have a fair amount of money, so it doesn't work for the user, so what? In that scenario, you could argue that maybe good enough is just good enough. It is not worth your time and attention to really perfect it. On the flip side is when you get to something like SARS, e-filing, tax submissions, and international payments. Something that maybe also takes 20 minutes once a year. However, there is a high user emotional attachment. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I am constantly worried that I'm going to get arrested for tax fraud because I just didn't know what I was doing. And I made a mistake because the entire system is terrible. As you can see, for me at least, it is a very high stress process. And in terms of risk, there is actual legitimate legal and financial danger if you do get it wrong. In the case of an international payment, if you do it wrong, either you or the other person could lose a large amount of money. So in this scenario, it is worth making sure that the main flow is easy to understand, but still, let's just say you're in a resource-strapped team, it might not be worth to perfect it over like in a month's time. You still just want to focus on the part that has that impact. Then you get to the kinds of things like a nice to have product where it's an e-commerce store, someone could buy it, they don't have to. I guess Temu is maybe a really good example of that. Here, okay, maybe the e-commerce thing is a bit much for once a week, depending on who you are, but it's like 40 minutes once a week. There's maybe high business stakes, but there's low user emotional attachment. If they get it, cool. If they don't, not the end of the world. So here the risk is really about the loss of conversions. So maybe now it's worth making sure that the app's value is really visible, it's emphasized. It's worth spending that little bit more time on the delight element. It's where UX is not a luxury, it actually becomes more essential. Solution ideation, part 2. How do we address the communication element? We've looked at the value element, but now we want to address the communication element. From my opinion, UX and human-centered design works best as a shared mindset and not a secret craft. What do I mean by that? Is, for me, one of the ways that we can accidentally make UX feel very expensive is that we treat it as something that only proper UX people are allowed to touch, only the people that are trained in UX. But often, UX and human-centered design are best as mindsets about asking better questions, checking with real humans, not AI humans, and thinking in flows, not just in screens. Now, I still think, obviously, we can really be the custodians of UX, but we should be less the owners of it and more the facilitators, the guides of UX. And for me, in South Africa, this isn't just a philosophical preference, it is becoming a practical necessity. We don't have those big research teams. We don't have fancy labs and huge budgets or time for the textbook perfect processes. So in my opinion, if we don't democratize UX, if we don't equip product managers and developers and BAs and marketers with the basic UX tools, then in a lot of cases, UX just doesn't happen at all. Or we burn ourselves out trying to do everything, and then in a lot of cases become seen as the bottleneck. So, small little plug because I have to, but this is one of the ways that I am personally trying to wrestle with this, and is actually one of the major reasons why I even started thinking about this concept, is because I myself have basically become business designer, end user, all of those things. And I'm trying to wrestle with it through Aussie. To be very honest, this whole concept of a South African user research platform started a few years ago, and it definitely started out of UX evangelism and naivety. I was extremely annoyed at just being blocked when I was trying to follow best practice. However, over the past 2 years, I've met some extraordinary people at meetups and different events and conferences, and I realized that I was being unrealistic. And so Aussie has evolved with me. Now, the idea isn't for perfect research studies with massive reports. Instead, it's looking at something like fast, cheap, mobile friendly research built for the South African realities and bringing in flexible pricing so that smaller teams can actually use it. It's an attempt, and it's one of many possible ones that we can all make in the industry to say, what if we make it easy to get just enough real user insight, just enough UX at the right time instead of nothing at all? And as I mentioned, I have now been on both sides, and I myself am trying to build it, trying to consider all the elements of the business, from myself as the business owner to the developers to the other designers to the clients and the final participants. It is all about balancing the needs. So, in closing, like any good process, we have to refine a little. We've got the actual practical behavior shifts. Firstly, and this is, I think, generic, and I think it was kind of mentioned by Nicola as well, is be curious, take initiative, think critically, don't just tick those boxes, don't just make it pretty, but also use your empathy on your stakeholders and your coworkers too. Understand where they're coming from, why they say no. Is it that they just don't understand? And definitely in that scenario, you must know your value, know your expertise. It's just about encouraging and educating those around you to also have the interest in the end user's experience. And I promise asking the forbidden question out loud of when should we not invest in UX, and preferably with your larger team, will ultimately help a lot. Too often they're just so sick and tired of us coming and pushing for the things, and they are always the ones that have to push back. We create this fighting role between us when we are one product team. We should all be asking, when should we and when shouldn't we invest in UX? When is it actually the right time to be doing these things? And when you do get the chance, scope the UX to match the actual value and impact at stake. And if you are waiting around, if you don't have the opportunity to do some of the research that you would really like to, there's always an opportunity to UX your processes internally. Prove the value and make your colleagues' lives a little easier. Make your design process more efficient. You'll be able to do more if your own process is more efficient. Use those superhero skills for good. I want to leave you with this. Don't strive for perfect UX. Strive for impactful and context-aware UX. Because that is ultimately what gets used. It gets valued, it's what gets funded, and it builds trust, not just with your end users, which is extremely important, but it builds trust with your team, with the stakeholders that you're working with. UX is not always worth it everywhere, but it is deeply worth it in the right places and at the right depth, with the right mindset. So I want to challenge you to be honest, to be pragmatic, and especially here in South Africa with all of the constraints we're working with and with all of the craziness that is happening. There's a lot of craziness. So try and follow this approach, and please give me feedback, and I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. So thank you very much. Let's definitely continue the conversation. Please feel free to either connect with me on LinkedIn, please follow as a user testing and Monkey and River on LinkedIn and Instagram. And also we do have a really awesome growing UX UI WhatsApp community that's made by a bunch of different people with different events and stuff like that. So please do try and join that. Thank you so much. is there any questions?
Yep, Tenaya, thank you. That was awesome. Lots of emojis. I see Danny Forson's also commented there. I thought I was wondering if she was here and she's been operating in the shadows. Um, so, so yeah, thank you for that very insightful talk. And I can see where the overlap between your talk and Nicola's talk was as well, and how complementary they are. I also just want to mention, take the opportunity, everyone, to check out to scan those QR codes, follow as a user testing, and also connect with Tenaya. Yeah, let me jump. I see we've got a question. We've got one question. Please add your questions if you have any. So far, we've got a question from Maru. I love that Maru's been so consistent in asking her questions. I love it when people are asking questions, and Maru's been so consistent. Um, Such a cool talk and ties in a lot with what I've experienced in my career. So it's nice to hear the same thoughts from someone else. What is one first step we can take to get an organization or a team to the shared UX mindset? Sorry.
Sure. So I guess I'll just I mean, there are many ways, and David, I'm going to say it depends on your specific context. But some of the ways that I found have really worked is honestly, it's this part of when you start to ask some of those questions. If someone comes to you and they say this is something that needs to be done, you actually go to them and you say, okay, I would really love to do this part of the process, but what is the objective of this? What kind of outcome are we hoping to get? Do you think it's worth it if we spend this much time on it, or do you think it's worth it if we do the user testing now? So I think just having those honest like questions and conversations with your team. And I will say, obviously, it doesn't happen overnight. It's none of this stuff is going to change overnight. I think, obviously, you definitely know that. But it's one of those things that the more you have those conversations, the more it helps. And also, I think if you do try and bring people more
Oh,
in a
shoot.
couple of different ways. Oh, have you lost me? Am I back?
No, no, yeah.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. Sorry, I heard something in the background. So yeah, so I think there's ways of doing it where if you are running the user test, actually have someone join. We did that recently where we got the stakeholder, and I think as if you're a dedicated researcher, you've probably done this. But if you're in a leaner team, a lot of times you kind of run the unmoderated test, or you do the thing out of sight, and then you show them the report and you ask for all these big things, and they haven't actually been taken along for the ride. So it's how can you take them along for the ride and actually have them watch one of the sessions. Or if you do show the report, because there's going to be stakeholders that don't want to join, phrasing it more as a workshop with them. So you're not just coming here to show them a thing. It's okay, cool. These are some of the insights. Let's workshop it together. How will we approach the outcome? What are things that you guys agree with or think are priorities? So I think it's ultimately it's that. It's just having more and more of those pragmatic conversations. And instead of when someone says no, being all defensive, it's allowing yourself to feel annoyed. I agree. Get angry. Sometimes it is frustrating, but then take that step back and try to see it from their perspective. Yeah. Cool. I don't know if there are any other questions or thoughts. Oh, Maru asks, would something like effort also make sense here? What impact would this have on our team or timeline? I think effort, yes, 100% would make a big difference. And I think one of the things that I'm going to be trying to explore fairly soon is kind of the a matrix of these things, is risk and impact all kind of bring in the idea of okay, effort. How long is this thing going to take? Who needs to be involved? And the impact on the team as well as the end user. So 100%, I think if it would be a fantastic thing to bring in. Yeah.